We filed off the trucks 2 by 2 into our gleaming white brand new supermarket. We were all nervous wrecks. We didn't know what to say, it was all too much for us. Behind our store was St. Pancras Coroner's office, and through a window we could see a fat lady putting dead people's clothes on hangers. Behind the coroner's office were row upon row of train tracks. Next door to our supermarket was an ancient little church that would become, thanks to Edgar Malroy, the most famous little church in the world. There were 14 different soap powders in every Shop-a-Lot store. 13 were marketed by the Italian-based multinational El Beno. The other brand was called St. Martha powder and was marketed by the Vatican. St. Martha was the sister of Mary Magdalene, the patron saint of prostitutes, brackets reformed. St. Martha was the patron saint of housewives. On the front of the packets of St. Martha powder was the claim that sisters in the Vatican used St. Martha powder when they cleaned Pope John John's cassock. Edgar Malroy used to call Pope John John, among other things, a drag queen. After our initial shock, we became accustomed to our supermarket. In fact, in no time at all, we became bored out of our infinity chips. The only bit of excitement came on Sundays when the priest from the church next door would come in and warn our customers that they were shopping with their very souls. The priest was also always getting into heated discussions with our floor manager, who kept pointing outside while the priest kept pointing at the ceiling. They never pointed at the same thing. They never agreed. "One day," the priest would shout, "just one day out of 7. Is that asking too much? Is that unreasonable? God made everything, in 6 days. Then he rested. We've got to follow his example. That's what it says in the Bible. It's critical that we spend Sundays praising God, not shopping. Sundays," he would say, "are for souls, not tins of what have you. God, not groceries." He went on and on like that every Sunday. None of our shoppers seemed to pay much notice, but our supermarket trolleys were mesmerised. We had never seen anything like the priest before in our short, ridiculous lives. We crowded around him, praying out loud and so on. He told us we had a divine mission to make shopping on Sundays as irritating as we possibly could, and of course, not knowing any better, we believed him and refused to be used on the Sabbath. Shoppers had to use baskets instead. Sometimes the priest would read out passages from the Bible about Sodom and Gomorrah and say that most Bible scholars agreed that one of the many wickednesses of the two cities was that their shops had remained open on Sundays. Sometimes the priest brought into the supermarket a giant crucifix on wheels that had a life-size Jesus holding 2 bags of shopping in his nailed hands. The bags would rotate around and around, knocking things off shelves. The priest's visits were the highlight of our week. When he stopped coming, we were all utterly devastated. Why the priest had stopped coming was simple. He had met Edgar Malroy. After George Mills Jr.'s funeral, a religious group took over the Barringer crater. They were known as second comers and spent every night sitting on the 50,000 orange plastic chairs cemented to the floor of the crater looking up at the sky, awaiting the second meteor which they believed would impact the Earth at exactly the same spot and would be even bigger than the first. The second comers believed that anyone directly under the meteor when it hit would be unharmed. They showed why this would be the case with complicated mathematics and a computer model. The second comers believed the impact of the second meteor would herald the arrival of God and his angels. The leader of the second comers thought he was God's messenger, etc., etc. Every time there was a shooting star, one of the second comers would say, "I thought that one was it for sure." I first met Edgar Malroy in 2024. He had just been expelled from his college. He was 23, and I was just 2 years old. I had been taken against my will all the way to Regent's Park by children playing truant, and was making my way back to the store, when I thought of the priest and decided to find out what had become of him. An old man at a bus stop across the road helped me up the steps of the church. I would later single-handedly climb Everest. 35 species of wild flower grew amid the grass which surrounded the church. Edgar Malroy had altered the outside of the church in only 2 ways. He had removed the cross on the spire and replaced it with a great big question mark, and he had placed a wooden placard over the entrance of the church on which he had painted the following words: "The world is tired of metaphysical assertions. Immanuel Kant, Prolegomena."